Hi, and welcome to our first episode of the Wheelhouse Web Solutions Waldorf Marketing Podcast. We're talking all things marketing, but with a Waldorf twist, bringing you guests and ideas to help you think about Waldorf marketing in new and different ways. I'm so excited to introduce our first guest, Ewen Finser. He and I actually went to Waldorf School together, grade school, all the way through high school. He's the founder and CEO of Venture Forth Media and his new project, Reddvisible. So I just wanted to introduce Ewan. We're gonna chat a little bit about Reddit marketing and how that applies to Waldorf School. So if you would introduce yourself, Ewan, and say anything else you might want to say.
Awesome. Thanks, Theo. Appreciate it. And yeah, it's great to be on for the first video here. So yeah, my background is in media, in content marketing. Got started about 10 years ago, putting together websites in my free time and trying to escape the cubicle. I had a kind of a corporate job and wasn't feeling super fulfilled in it. So I wanted to kind of create a lifestyle business. We did that, but kind of grew out of that, matured, and started realizing that, we could build a team, we could scale this. And so we started developing media properties. And just the best way to think about that is just blogs, essentially, but not just blogs. We do some e-commerce, we do some different types of email marketing, newsletters, and things like that. So it's kind of an all-inclusive umbrella for content marketing. We really strive to serve very niche markets when we go out and we tackle a vertical. And so we've built that up as a portfolio. We've raised some investment funds. We've allocated capital, and we've launched services. And kind of our latest project is, like you said, Reddvisible, and it's kind of trying to capture this new phenomenon in the next evolution of the web where we are today, which is this concept of user-generated content. It's not a new concept, but it's kind of having a moment right now, and that is really the through the experience of Reddit. And so Reddit is the dominant kind of winner recently in kind of taking market share. A lot of, if you've noticed, searching in Google, Reddit is coming up for everything now. So you might be searching for, like, what are the best binoculars, for bird watching, and pretty sure that there's going to be some Reddit results in there. And Reddit itself is a very interesting phenomenon. We'll get into that, but that's kind of our latest project. We're helping brands represent themselves and communicate with our audiences on this new platform. It's not a entirely new platform, but it's having a new moment right now. So we're helping brands reach their audiences and really build community on Reddit.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So we work on some search engine optimization projects with schools, and so this is all part of Google and how the search engines go through and build their algorithm of how search results show up for different keywords. And one of the fascinating and challenging parts of working on SEO seems to be that the search engines update their algorithms and prioritize different things. Part of that, I feel like, is always the ongoing tussle back and forth of Google wanting to show useful and high quality results to people, and then businesses and other groups trying to show their content as much as possible. And so this seems to be the latest iteration of that. I'm not a Reddit user, so would you tell folks a little bit about
Yeah.
what Reddit is? And I mean, dived into it a little bit, but for somebody who's never heard of Reddit, what would you do there? How would you use it?
Yeah. So we can go back. Reddit's actually a very old platform. It kind of goes back to the earlier days of the internet. But for its first kind of life cycle, it was a very niche platform, primarily for nerds, counterculture, tech. And essentially what it is it's a decentralized forum network. And so there's big Reddit. So if you go to reddit.com, there's a homepage, there's things that are trending. You can create a profile, you can comment and engage across all sorts of subverticals. But really what they're made up of is thousands and thousands of individual communities. And so you'll go to reddit.com, and then it'll be /r/whatever. could be cats, it could be golden doodles, it could be gardening, it could be there's so many interesting angles as you go down that rabbit hole. And within those communities, they're called subreddits. These are decentralized. They're anyone can create a subreddit, and they are self-regulated, self-governed. And so they create their own rules, and you can see those typically when you're in a subreddit. That'll be in the sidebar, and it'll say like no spam or like keep it respectful. And but then there also will be other subreddits that are like we don't care what you do. And so there's kind of this when you've seen one Reddit, you've seen one Reddit. Like they're all kind of different. There's a certain culture to it, but it's kind of a confederated network of subreddits, and anyone can join. There's no restrictions. You can join different subreddits, and when you join a subreddit, that'll populate your news feed or your home feed. Will start showing discussions, and that's the best way to think about it. It's more of a forum. It's a two-way kind of bi-directional platform, whereas the older web model of the last 10 years was more blogs and like having a one-way relationship with your audience. Now it's very much the comments are almost as important, or sometimes more important than the initial post. And so there's the two ways you can three ways really. You can post, create a post of a question you have or a topic for discussion. You can also participate and comment, and you can upvote and downvote, and that kind of determines what comments get higher placement or what posts get featured more prominently. And everyone has the same power there. You can, upvote or downvote. And then there's this kind of currency, social currency of Reddit. It's called karma, and you get the karma by other people upvoting your posts or your comments. And so that's kind of a high karma. There's not a defined value to it other than it creates legitimacy. When you look at someone's profile, if they have high karma, it tends to, they have an account that's been around for a while, they may be more trustworthy. For some subreddits, having a certain threshold of karma, you have to have like a 50 karma to participate. So they kind of set thresholds so to avoid spam. But it's an evolving world, but that's kind of Reddit kind of in a nutshell.
That's awesome, and that's super helpful. Of course, a fun twist to talking about Waldorf marketing to have karma in the mix.
Yes.
But yeah, it's super interesting. It sounds like almost going back to the early promises of what the internet was going to be, which is really a place for people to have conversation and interaction. And it goes back to some of the core aspects of marketing where people really trust other people's opinion. They want to know, if they're buying a new bike or whatever it might be, they want to talk to people who've used this. And they want to hear, how did it work? What is your honest opinion on what the cons are? What is your honest opinion on what the pros are? And that's kind of an interesting segue into talking about how Waldorf schools should think about Reddit and look at Reddit, because there are really interesting conversations happening. I read a book, was actually by a guy who sends his kid to the Waldorf schools, Waldorf School Santa Barbara, Doc Searles. It was one of the first like big internet books called the Clue Train Manifesto. And one of the things he's talking about is people are having conversations about brands and products, and you as a brand can either participate in the ongoing conversation, or it can happen in spite of you or about you without your participation. And you really need to make sure you make the right decision around what that is. And I'm hoping I'm not putting words in his mouth. That might have been What Would Google Do, which is also a great book. But does that kind of sum up a little bit of why brands might, and schools in particular, might want to be present and at least start to think about Reddit as a important part of that place where conversations are happening?
Yes, and I think the answer, it's a tricky one, right? Because it's also a very vulnerable position to be in. Like you said, the conversations are going to happen. Particularly now with the rise of Reddit. Reddit has grown 7 times in the last 9 months, and 1 in 7 1 in 7 people on this earth visit Reddit at least once a month. There are over 1 billion monthly users. So it's this thing, right? It's like it's now the third most popular website on the internet. It just overtook Facebook. So that's kind of the where if you're doing something on Facebook, if you're doing something on Instagram, or any of these other platforms, Reddit now is really important, right? And it's important for two reasons. One is because it's a social platform on its own. It's kind of this, it's not exactly like Facebook, but it has that kind of network effect. And so there are people that just use Reddit. There are people that they open up their browser and they go to Reddit and they see a Reddit result and they're like, oh, I know that. I know I want to be on Reddit. I want to interact with the internet through Reddit. And then there are people that are searching Google, and that's kind of a separate but connected use case. And they're now getting surfaced because Google has decided that user generated content deserves more precedence in search. And so it's these two things at once. On the one hand, it's a social network. On the other hand, it's a search engine proxy. And so for those two reasons, I think it's really, really important because if you have an SEO strategy, Reddit has to be a part of it. If you have a social media strategy, Reddit has to be a part of it now.
Yeah.
And to your point about these conversations are happening. That's usually our first contact with brands that we're working with is how do I get like there's this Reddit result and someone is spouting off on us and they don't know what they're talking about. And there's always some nuance to that conversation. Like there's usually at the core there's some problem with their product that maybe they don't want to address, but probably is some inaccurate information. And so deciding how to engage is important.
Yeah.
Um, but I would say at the very minimum, at least having a social listening platform or someone who is responsible for collecting and collating, feedback on Reddit about your school, about, there are conversations. Parents are asking for unbiased opinions about
Yes.
school.
Yeah.
And so the question is, how do you engage, right? And we can kind of get into that. But I think it's very, very important to be aware of this. At the very least, be paying attention to it, and at the very least, collecting feedback and being aware of what is out there.
Yeah.
What are the conversations? Step one, and step two is how should we engage?
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting. I really like what the term social listening, and I don't think it's something schools necessarily do a lot of, but that's really being aware of and trying to find if there are conversations happening about you, what are they, and where do those myths come from? If they are myths, if there is a problem that's out there that, instead of saying, hey, this isn't a problem, if 10 different people are saying this on social media or Google reviews or whatever, that can be an interesting place to really honestly explore. Like maybe we have a problem with a teacher or a part of the curriculum or something that we either aren't explaining well or didn't deal with or need to apologize for or do clean up on. And so I think it's really, really, really helpful um, to do that social listening because it can really flag things for you that might not be aware of otherwise, or may not have quite brought to the surface as, hey, this is actually a problem that needs to address because it's going to fester. And that I think is a really interesting part of kind of this culture, this internet culture of forums, which is like you're going to get unvarnished feedback, which isn't always comfortable on your school, on Waldorf education per se. Um, but the other interesting side of that is also what I've seen reading about Waldorf on Reddit is you also get genuine user experiences saying, "Hey, I was an alum and I had this great experience. This is what I experienced. This was the positive of it." To the same extent, you also get people who had genuinely negative experiences, and they'll talk about that. But I think what people appreciate about it is that they're genuine. This is
Mhm.
real people's opinions. Um, so that's a little bit of a tangent, but I want to reel it back in and say, like, if I'm a school thinking about engaging with Reddit, how is that, a volunteer, a parent volunteer? Is that someone on staff who creates a personal profile? Like, how does that even work? Would you
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. What's the right approach? Especially because you want to build trust as a person or an institution. How would you do that?
Yeah, I think it's in some ways similar to discussions around like Facebook, or having a Facebook group or community. Is the community element, I think, is the through line here. If we kind of zoom out beyond, okay, there's something that happened with marketing and we should be doing this marketing thing. It's, well, what is why? And I think if we look at, particularly in this day of like AI, starting to take over, the old paradigm of, we're going to put out a press release or we're going to publish an update on our blog. We're going to control, like on the school's website, and control the kind of the narrative. And not that people are intentionally doing that. That's just the old model, right?
Yeah, for
And
sure.
then maybe we'll get some feedback at the next parent meeting or board meeting, because someone read this and was upset, or maybe they'll write us an email and have some thoughts. The paradigm is kind of shifting from that kind of one, like we talked about, that one-way relationship, to now that for brands and publishers, AI has enabled content to be produced, mediocre content to be produced at scale. um, I think what Google's trying to do, and I think what people are looking for, because it's not really Google that decided this, they started noticing that people were searching in Google and appending Reddit. So they'd be
Mhm.
like, best private schools, you know, Chapel Hill, Reddit, or they put in a school name, Reddit. And so, like, people were voting with their feet. They were using Google to search Reddit because
Yeah,
they wanted to get that unvarnished. And that's kind of the culture of Reddit, is unvarnished. There's a little bit of an anonymous culture to it, which is sometimes problematic, but you don't have to be anonymous. And so I would recommend that brands, one, create add that to their list of, if they're doing social media marketing or doing any kind of marketing, just have a bullet point for Reddit. And even if you don't know exactly what you're going to do with it, just start there, thinking about it, engaging, seeing what is getting surfaced for your school on
yeah,
Reddit. And that's a
yeah,
very interesting. Just go into Reddit and see what are the conversations that are happening right now, or historically, because even if they're not happening right now, but it's historical, that's what shows up in Google. And so
yeah.
if someone had an experience 7 years ago that was positive or negative, um, that's what's going to show up. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
being able to kind of understand that and engage, and I think create a community on Reddit, just like you would create a community on Facebook for people that want to share stories and uh, kind of participate. That's one angle. So the very basic output there would be create your own subreddit for your school. Um,
Yeah.
because sometimes other people will create it for you, and it might not be, it might be for reasons that are, maybe they're having a bad experience, and so they want to go and kind of share. The collection of detractors will start their own subreddit about your school. So I
Yeah.
think going and registering your subreddit is a very important thing to do. And
Mhm.
then coming up with a strategy to share, to communicate with your audience, just like you would for Facebook or any of the other platforms that you were already on. And if you're creating content for your website, and you're creating content for an email distribution, think about how you can repurpose that. It's not incredibly difficult, and share that on Reddit, so that you can start kind of distributing your message more broadly.
So the thing that's jumping out to me is when we talk to our blogging clients about blogging and SEO, we really talk about, you want to answer questions that parents are typing into Google, the questions that they have.
Yes.
My child can't sit still. If Waldorf is the answer, what is the question that people are putting in? These forums, especially Reddit, is a place where people put questions in. And so really, if you're starting to have a content strategy for your blog, that's a really interesting place where you might be able to put out information that really genuinely answers someone's question. And it may not, you know, in the same way that blogging, answering somebody's question may not bring someone to your school, but it may bring people to someone to their local older school. Similarly, answering questions about child development, answering questions about Waldorf. How is Waldorf different than Montessori? All these questions, those are questions that people are asking on Reddit, and either If it hasn't been answered already, answering it. And if it has been answered, seeing if you can add some value to that conversation, some nuance, something useful. Does that sound like, am I thinking about that in the right way?
Totally. And you hit on one angle, which is the local. There's also a very strong culture around just local community. Like there'll be for every area, there'll be a local subreddit for your community.
Mm.
And it's almost like a neighborhood discussion. And so people will be asking questions in there about schools or about what are the alternative schools available in my city town. um, and so being able to participate in that and be able to kind of surface your school as an option, I think is part of it totally. And yeah, I think answering those questions, those frequently asked questions, basically anything you are doing on the blog already, like if you've already had buy-in to publish content on your website, this is just about redistributing it to Reddit and reformulating it maybe in more bite-sized chunks or things like that, or conversation starters even,
Yeah.
like putting things out there to the community. And as you start to add members, because each subreddit you can join, you start to get 20, 30, 40, 100, a few hundred members and friendly people in the community, or just people that are interested. You can start having conversations and asking questions and soliciting feedback too about, hey, if we wanted to start a new early childhood program, like, is there an interest,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's real time. This is like, that's the other thing about Reddit. It's both static, like it shows up in search forever. There's some forums or some subreddits from 10 years ago that are ranking in Google, and it's current because it's that social media. So you get those two things happening at once.
Yeah, and I think the aspects of that are probably, have people, marketers waking up in a cold sweat thinking of, somebody unhappy from 7 years ago is still going to surface. But I think a
Yeah.
lot of the principles apply that schools have gotten used to with Google reviews and Facebook
Yeah.
reviews and things like that. Of, if you get a negative review, engage in a meaningful way and in a way that, is for public consumption of, here's how we tried to address this. We're sorry you had this experience. We'd love to continue that conversation. And then the people who are clearly like unhinged or like, usually will show their cards and people can see that. And the
Yes.
people who are reasonable, you can say like, look, the school made the best effort to address this problem for various reasons. It didn't work out for this family. That's okay. And so you can show kind of the character of who you are and as an institution or as a person in your responses to bad negative stuff on there. And then also understanding that like that's maybe not the right fit for everyone. And
Yeah.
that's also okay. But being really true to who you are and what you are and how you want to treat people.
And sharing your positive I mean, encouraging your community, like part of it, it's like what is marketing, at the one end, it can be very manipulative, right? You can be engineering interaction, which is probably not what I would recommend. But on the other end, you can be telling your community, hey, just like, hey, here's a Facebook group, here's our Reddit community, please share your stories
Yeah.
of,
Yeah.
share your experiences. And it's not saying, go and downvote this angry person. It's no, just go add your voice, because again, it's like with any kind of reputation that's what we're talking about, is reputation management, which
Yeah.
is a whole umbrella of marketing.
Yeah.
Um, that's what we're kind of talking about, is how do you, one, engage with the feedback, don't just ignore it.
Yeah.
And then how do we create the most effective strategies for reputation management are often about sharing the full story. It's
Yeah.
not about saying no, this never happened, or trying to get that removed, although that could be a could be a strategy. It's about sharing the other side. And
Yeah.
so, but there's very little incentive to share the positive. And so that's gonna and it may, one result may be, yeah, like you said earlier, there may be some issues that come up that it's like, wait, is this person like you said, deranged or whatever? Like, is this person, or is there something there? Like, what actually happened? And
Yeah.
kind of going back as an institution and saying, why is that person? And maybe the answer is yeah, they didn't get accepted, or they didn't, something happened in their very particular set of circumstances that, it's not it. But maybe you also find a pattern
Yeah.
of, and that would be important to address at a fundamental level
Yes.
beyond, just a marketing level, but certainly encouraging the community to participate, and even having the community as a forum, literally as a forum, to have real-time conversations. Again, I think for the institutions, the brands and the schools that can do this, really can really be open about this, and embrace it and do it without fear, and know that their product is, it's not without faults, but it's a good product.
Yeah.
Though they're gonna reap a lot of rewards over the long term by having this community that feels responsive, and it's not, you know oh, we'll get to it at some meeting in the future, or you
Yeah.
know it's actually real time, and it's both scary and exciting at the
Yeah,
same time.
absolutely. Yeah, that's the fascinating part. It's scary, but I think it's a really one of the reasons I really wanted to have you on is it feels like Reddit is having such a moment, and really being built in to Google search and other search engines, and also just um, yeah, search and marketing is shifting. And so I really wanted our clients and other Waldorf community members to really have a sense of like, yeah, this is maybe a scary and sometimes hostile form to be on, but it is a real opportunity for schools that understand what's happening, and jump in there with goodwill and a willingness to engage. And I think also schools may find that there are folks in your community who are Reddit users, who are already on there, who would be, um, really willing to be your ambassadors and help kind of shepherd that. So that's an interesting
Yes.
question
it
to ask as well.
um Demographically, to speak to that real quick, this was surprising to me, but the largest, I think it's like 44% of Reddit users are Gen Z, and then like
Yeah.
some 30 something percent are millennials. So,
So
it's,
they've got 70% right
yes.
there.
So if we're
Yeah.
thinking about the future, right? And how will, whether it's Reddit or something else, I think that's kind of what was happening. And the thing about Reddit that's maybe different than TikTok or Instagram is, or even Facebook now, is like a lot of those platforms are kind of built on this. Like, think about TikTok; it's just an interruption machine.
Yeah.
You go on TikTok, and you know, uh, Rudolph Steiner would probably have something to say about that, and you just get distracted. And you're like,
Yeah.
you go 30 minutes, you can just be distracted, distracted, distracted. Whereas Reddit is a little bit different. It's a little bit more, the user has agency. They can join communities. It's not in your face. It's actually very old school. It's about writing out cogent thoughts. And if you don't have a cogent thought, people will say that doesn't make sense. Like, we're
Yeah.
going to downvote that. So it's kind of like a revenge of the analog a little bit in that sense. And it's interesting that Gen Z and millennials are kind of going back to that. It's kind of like
Yeah.
the end of the Baroque era. We're going back to something more classical.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, this has been such a fascinating conversation. We do have a toddler who has joined us and woke up from her nap. Gonna put my silk over the screen, um, as one does. But yeah, so I super appreciate you coming on. I think this is such a fascinating conversation. I'd love to have you back on to continue this conversation, because I think this is a really interesting opportunity for schools, and a place that they really need to be. And I think to your last point, that's a question I probably get the most often, is how do we talk to this new generation of parents? Because I think we have this, uh, schools have that question, brands have that question of, should we be on TikTok? Should we be doing Vines when that was a thing? It was a TikTok precursor for those of you who didn't grow up in the 2000s. But yeah, I think, yeah, that question is a question that a lot of schools live with? How do
Yeah.
you get to people who may never set foot on campus, who may never pick up the phone, who may never send you an email, because they've already made up their mind based on what they're seeing online? And some of
Yep.
that, for a long time, we've had that conversation of, yeah, your website needs to reflect the beauty and wonder of Waldorf education and your values. Your social media needs to reflect that. But this is another place of, there's a whole generation of folks coming up who are going to look on Reddit before they even look at those other three platforms.
Yes, it's the very much a place where like people will put in Reddit, like I said, a search engine. They want to get unvarnished. They want to get the whole truth, and they're willing actually to overlook. I think there's another subtext to overlook some of the negative stuff
Yeah.
because Reddit is like a cacophony, right? It's like all sorts of opinions, and the idea is that you digest it all, but you get
Yeah.
all of it. You get
Yeah.
the best and the worst, all of it in that. And so you like I think that's people are looking for real, and
Yeah.
they don't necessarily, and so I think that is really the angle here. And yeah, I think it's an opportunity. And the other thing I'd get to is I think the challenge comes with social media. It can be a nice top of the funnel, as we talked about, like for people to just, oh, what's Waldorf? But
Yeah.
that's a bigger question that might be beyond the purview of a local school. Maybe that's like an OSNA marketing is like, what is Waldorf?
Yeah.
That's probably where they should be talking. But like and that can also work on Reddit, but a lot of times with Reddit, because it is a search proxy,
Mhm.
because it has a search bar, people are typing in, they're pre-qualifying themselves. What are
Yeah.
the private schools in, Raleigh, North Carolina?
Yeah.
um,
Yep.
what are the alternative schools like, Montessori and Waldorf schools in this? They're pre-qualifying. They're saying, I'm curious, I'm interested, and that is the person. That's going to be the easiest conversation to have, rather than let me catch some Gen Zer like who's maybe just thinking about, I don't know, having kids, like actually getting people who have pre-qualified themselves. And I think that's the interesting part about Reddit and
Yeah.
Google, but now Reddit and Google together.
Yeah. It's such an interesting combo and alliance between those two. Yeah, that's a great point. And I was really floored when, in preparing for this conversation, I was looking at Waldorf subreddits and seeing a number of my clients have people who've gone on and posed the question, what is the Waldorf School of, I'm not going to pick on anybody, but like, what's the Waldorf School of Francistown really like? Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, you want to be part of that conversation, or
Yes.
you want some parent ambassadors, or you want folks that you trust, who are part of that conversation. The other question that I had, I think, sort of as a final question is it helpful in terms of the trust building, to have somebody, if they are speaking on behalf of the school, to like be able to um, in their profile really disclose a little bit more about themselves and their role. Say like, hi, I'm Theo Grow. I'm a
Yes.
Waldorf parent, a Waldorf alum, and I work for in the admissions department at the Francistown Waldorf School.
Yes. So I think there's different ways to play it, right? I think that is the right way for a brand, particularly like a Waldorf school, to engage, is to disclose,
Yeah.
on the one hand, encourage parents to like, share their
Yeah.
experience on Reddit.
Yeah.
And you have to let go of like, you can't control exactly what they're going to say, pros and cons. And like cons are important too. And there are
Yeah.
going to be cons. It costs money or whatever, like, but having people in your, I'm a parent ambassador, or I'm working, and just having it in the profile, that's the way, because there is an anonymous culture to
Yeah.
Reddit, which allows people to speak freely, but
Yeah.
also doesn't necessarily hold them accountable.
Yeah.
And so being able to speak honestly about your school and say, hey, here's who I am, that's actually going to be a huge advantage, I think, because
Yeah.
um, it's kind of disrupting a culture of like a lot of noise.
Yeah.
There's truth in the noise, but if you can come in and say, here's who I am, and disclaimer, and I see that all the time with brand owner, even the owners of a brand will come in and say, hey, just to say it up front, I represent this brand, but this is why I started the company. We actually fixed that problem.
Yeah.
You can, this we had a recall or whatever, and being able to speak about it, and then seeing the reaction to that comment, even being like, "Oh, that's true," like they did up, and you start to be able to have the outcomes you're looking for without having it be this overdone kind of marketing play.
Absolutely. And so, if folks have further questions for you or wanted to get in contact with you or wanted to work with you, how would they do that?
Yeah, so I have you know, certainly on LinkedIn you can connect with me. I'm the only Ewen Finser out there. But but if there's there's I can probably drop my email in the notes if you want to reach out. We also have reddvisible.com, reddvisible.com, and there's a contact form, there's an intake form there if people are interested. But I think I'd be just interested in helping out communities and Waldorf communities, and would just be happy to have a chat if someone's interested or wanting to get started, needs a crash course, and like, what do I do?
Yeah.
And also support you, Thea, in what you're doing, and be a resource to you um, if it comes up. So that's they can also contact you and say, hey, that guy you had on about Reddit, like, what should we? Can I ask a couple questions? That'd be fine too.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I feel like this is going to be an ongoing area for schools that they are going to want to dig into and explore, and I'm sure questions will come up. Um, I so appreciate you coming on. This is just fascinating, and I love the aspect of it that this is a return for the internet to the initial promise of what this was going to be. This was going to be people talking to people in an
Yes,
authentic way about products and experiences and brands. And I think if we can have the Michaelic courage to represent ourselves and talk about our issues and reflect on what our pros and cons are, I think this can be an incredibly good space for schools to be.
absolutely. It's an opportunity for sure, and I'm excited to be here, and yeah, I would love to be a resource for the community.
And you just in closing, you're also a Waldorf parent, and I think you're second generation Waldorf alum at this point.
Yeah, I guess well, let's see, third, I think if you count my grandparents. I think my grandmother went to one of the first Waldorf schools in Germany.
There
Uh,
you go.
so in my children, so that'll be the fourth generation. So yeah, definitely dyed in the wool over here.
Yeah, that's awesome. So it's so nice to have that, um, both the tech perspective that you bring and the Waldorf perspective that you bring as well. So thank you so much for coming on. It's been a real pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Theo.
Thank you. Take care, Ewan.
Bye.
Bye.